Anyway, so what we are just starting right now is a series of conversation about the art of hosting and art of participatory leadership. And it is a result of acknowledging somehow that we speak a lot about what we are passionate about, but not so many people really understand the background, what is it about, and what the value of the application of art of participatory leadership methods and ways of working is about. So we came up with this idea to host a series of conversation about that. And there is no better place to start, I think, than talking with Jan, who is one of the, is it the right way to say, Jan, that you are one of the founders of the methodology or the circle of art of hosting, you know, the tribe?
I like the word founder, because it could also speak of that you found something. Do you know what I mean? You know, because I really feel like that we found something. It's not like we invented it. It was like it was already there. So I like the word founder in that sense, that we came across something. I know we were looking for it, but we came across something.
Yeah. So in just a second, I'm going to ask you, you know, like, what is it actually that you have found?
Yeah.
But before that, I just want to say, like, who is right now present in the conversation. So it's me, Adriana. My role today is that be the, I don't know if interviewer is the right word, the right word, but somehow to ask the questions and hold the space for the story that you are going to share, Jan. And in a very similar role, Petra is here with us. So we will be the curious people asking the questions, okay? And Jan, we kind of want to hear your story. And the first thing that we are going to ask is, you know, we say art of hosting and art of participatory leadership a lot. This is what we do. This is what we work with. But what is it? So as a founder, being the founder, you know, what would you say? What is AOPL? AOH? What's that?
AOH, yeah, what is all this? I mean, it's interesting because we have been, of course, talking about this for 20 years. And I know if I look into some of these email lists, you can see there's thousands and thousands of people using these practices of art of hosting and art of participatory leadership. And still, more than almost 25 years down the line, I'm still thinking, having a question like this, I'm still thinking, what is it really? What is it really, right? Because I'm never tired of exploring that question of what is art of hosting, what is participatory leadership, what can it do, and so forth. I mean, participatory leadership is not necessarily something we invented neither. I mean, if we talk about an act of leadership where you engage human beings in their own development, in a learning process, in a innovative development, co-creative process, this is not new in any way. You know, that have happened throughout thousands of years. You can even say that the species that we are a part of here, the human race, we developed like that, you can say. So we always did it. And what we found in back in the 90s, mid-90s, was that this part called the art of hosting and harvesting conversations that matters. That might be some uniqueness around this, that we really believed in, that it was our capability of having conversations amongst ourselves. And we know the whole message around words create worlds, that we have the ability to create our own world, and also a world we perceive as possible and as constructive, as valuable for us. We can create that together if we put our heads together and we kind of motion the muscles of having conversations with each other, meaning that conversations is as much as listening as it is as speaking. It is as much as focusing on what matters to us and not just what might at some point matter or not to us, right? So it's about being very explicit about what is it really that is meaningful to us? What are the questions that will evoke a meaningful conversations and kind of create some kind of value to us? And how do we host in the meaning of facilitate maybe, but how do we host such a conversation? How do we participate in such a conversation? And how do we have such conversations with others? Also, when we want to harvest, meaning take out we talk about harvest the outcome, document, record the outcome of such a conversation. How do we do that? So it was an exploration from the beginning in why is this important, but also what is it really? What is really the DNA pieces in this? And how do you do it? How do you do it? And you will see in our work that we often focus on these three questions: why, what, and how. And I think for us it's important because this is a practice. This is, I don't know if I don't think there is a book called The Art of Hosting. I'm pretty sure it isn't. I know it's mentioned in a number of books around change and how you work with large groups, interventions. The Art of Hosting is mentioned there, but it's not about the books. It's about a practice. How do you actually do it? How do you do it with yourself? How do you host yourself? How do you host others? How are you when you are in conversations, and how do you do it with your colleagues, your friends, your peers, right? So for me, art of hosting and harvesting conversations, for me, that's somehow a definition on participatory leadership. And participatory leadership is a practice of leadership that we can all do that will allow learning amongst us to arise, that will allow us to co-create, to even innovate together, to be creative together in what we see is meaningful, in what we see is of matter to us. Yeah.
So would I be, me being an engineer, I have this need to make things like down to earth and practical and structured. Yeah. So if I was to kind of like, let's say, oversimplify, like very intentionally oversimplify and kind of define what art of participatory leadership or art of hosting is, would you agree, would you allow it to be said in a way that this is a family of thinking frameworks, methodologies, and practices that help communities and people come together in a meaningful conversations, find solutions together, and then harvest practical results in a way of conclusions and actions that then they put into practice in their way. So like methods, thinking frameworks, and practices.
Yeah, you're right, Adriana. I think you are. I mean, it comes back to when I speak about the why, the what, and the how. And I can also see that the many trainings we have done have been focusing on exactly that, the why. What are these models of why do we need to understand the importance of our heads coming together? Why is it important for us right now, and now might be the present time, which is plus minus 30, 40 years, I suppose. Why is it important now that we work more collaboratively, more collectively, using the collective intelligence of the group, of the team, of the community? Why is that important? And this is where some of these thinking models, the theory, if you like, is important for us, because we know if we want to change positively, constructively, change behavior, we need to understand why. Why is that important? So yes, that's a part of it, but we also need to understand, what is this about? We talk about different methodologies when we talk about the art of hosting on participatory leadership. Methodologies such as the World Cafe, open space technology, appreciative inquiry, the circle practice. These are some of the four, you can say, key methodologies that are systemic by nature that we are using in the art of hosting and participatory leadership. And it's important because these answers to what will lead us to how, because they lead us to a structure, a way where we can work with groups of different sizes to actually to connect, to be collectively co-creative together, for instance, right? And then it is the how. How do we do it? We need to practice. It's nice to have a conversation with peers about why should we do this and what it's about. But in the end of the day, if we want to change something concretely, we need to come together and start doing it. And in that sense, it's not rocket science, is it? I mean, putting our heads together and coming up with solutions that we co-create, I mean, that's not rocket science. We're doing it all the time. But to understand how we can even, elaborate on that, even how we can develop our ability to co-create, even when it's very complex. There is a tendency that the higher level of complex challenges that we are facing, we are often looking for very simple solutions. But we do know for a fact that simple solutions will not support us in coming up with creative solutions for complex systems. We need, in that retrospect, we can see we need more systemic approaches to do this, to understand, not necessarily understand the complexity, but how we can act in it. And this is where this often comes together. And I think that's also why I have seen, or not just me, or we together in this group here, we have been working together since almost more than 15 years or something, right? And we have seen the evolution of what we have done together. And I think it's because we are not necessarily giving the answer, but we are giving at least a way to work with more complex challenges in our environment, whether that is amongst groups we are in, or communities in our companies, or in our business or private life, right?
I think in many ways you actually tapped into the next two questions, that we kind of agreed that it would be important to ask. And that is, like, how do you know it's time for inviting these tools and these ways and these practices into practice? Like, what is the context in your experience? And you've been in this work for a long time. What is really the context that calls for the application of AOPL and art of hosting?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's about from a very kind of, you could say, meta level, looking at what is happening. If I'm looking into my own work the past 25 years, it's like I'm watching a collective awareness becoming more conscious about the complexity in our environments. I remember I wrote a paper in the late 90s around solving complex challenges in an organization. And I was in that paper kind of describing more participatory ways to do that. And I remember distributing this paper amongst colleagues and friends and even clients who said, that's really interesting. And it's like, but they didn't really, not because I was telling the truth, it's not like that, but it's just like, it was too far-fetched, right? It was not like, yeah, maybe one day we will get there. And when we see the development of art of hosting and art of participatory leadership being the same, we also see that in the beginning, we were doing trainings for the, from the analogy of the priest preaching to the choir, we were preaching to the choir, right? We were preaching to the people. We are not trying to preach, but no, to the people who are already in the church, who knew we needed to look at it differently. So what I have seen the last 25 years is like a collective awakeness of saying, hey, it is a complex world. It is complex challenges. We need definitely different ways to handle this than we have done before, right? So just calling upon experts is not enough anymore. We need expertise, yes, but we also need to gather some of the people who are sitting with these challenges on an everyday life. As an example, I see more and more staff engagement, for instance, when it comes to complexity and challenges, complex challenges in corporate environments. I have seen more and more that senior management level or management level are evolvingly horizontally and vertically in the organization, because they do know that the major knowledge around any challenges is kind of absorbed in the whole organization and not just with a few.
Now, it sounds to me, business is complex in its essence right now. So are you saying that whatever is going on, it's always time for AOPL? AOPL is answer. Whenever it feels complex, here it comes, the magic solution.
Call upon it. Yeah, but I think the magic in it is that the magic is you just need to turn, just to look at the way that you have been working so far. If you haven't really, collected the people around you that might have a part of the solution, that might be actually how simple, you can even say, I used that word of simplicity before, how the solution could be, that you just need to turn around and see, how can I actually involve and engage the people who are part of the problem also to become part of the solution? Because we have, since years, and look at us, we also have degrees from universities, which makes us experts in different walks of life, different professions, right? And we have been used to this, somehow this kind of paradigm where if we have complicated issues, even complex issues, and the higher level of complicated, the higher level of complex, we just need to call on higher level of expertise. And at some point, that's not enough anymore. And the higher level of complexity, we do know requires a different approach, because the way that we have done it so far does not always apply. And what we do have seen applying participatory leadership in large organizations or in communities is that if we shifted from believing that experts will solve it all into, well, we need expertise, but we also need to engage the people who is part of the challenge to be part of the solutions. That could be communities of citizens. It could be staff of variants in different organizations. We need to engage them, involve them. And everybody, and I think what I'm interesting to see over the last 25 years is that more and more are seeing this, and more are realizing we know why, and we also have a sense of what, but we have a really difficulty with, but then how do we do it? And I see most of the time when my kind of inbox or phone is calling about any kind of work on this, it's not that much about why anymore. It's not that much about what, because we know what to do. We need to engage them somehow. But how do we do that? How do we do that when we haven't done it before? How do we do that when we have a different culture that is not used to being engaged? Or how do we do it when we have a very large group? Or as it is right now, how do we do it when everything is online? Right. So often and that has been an awakening the last 25 years, a movement from understanding why and what this is into how do we do it. Yeah,
so
that's at least.
I think it would be great, could you share some very specific, concrete examples, like where organizations has used this approach and it helped, and not really go in the depth of it, but just, like examples of situations or problems that were solved by this approach.
Yeah. This year we have been working with a organization that wanted to understand, but mostly wanted to develop a new digital strategy because of the consequences of the pandemic and the confinement, and what we all know is everything became online, right? They are normally an organization that within a specific profession are the leading organization of offering training on and training programs on all level to a certain professional staff, groups of staff throughout all Europe. They are delivering more than 2,500 trainings a year, basically. Until about a year ago, they were 99.9% on site, meaning people were traveling throughout 20, almost 30 countries in Europe, having these kind of trainings. And they had as many trainings providers, and they were all organized by this organization, this company actually. And suddenly they needed to rethink that. Now they understood that the new normal will be that either it will keep staying online, or at least they need to offer some hybrid. It was not necessarily always sustainable to have people traveling all over, right? So they know there's something they need to change. They wanted to create a new training program and a new strategy for implementing that. And normally what they have done is that they had a different working groups. They have had different committees working on this on behalf of the many. And it has been mostly throughout the last 15 years, it has been a bit of copy paste. What we did last year, we're going to offer this again, and then we have done a bit of surveying. Have people been happy? Not, as it often is. When when there's no need to rock the boat won't get rocked, right? They haven't needed to do so, but suddenly the boat was not only rocked, it was shaken and stirred and turned over. And for that reason, they were not fully sure how they wanted to do that. They contacted a colleague of mine, a company, and I was involved from the beginning because they had this sense. They actually came and said, we need to do a design thinking process. It showed up. They didn't actually know what that was, basically. But they had a sense that they need to do it differently, that they have done it before. And for that reason, we have involved not only their staff, not only their training providers in all countries, but of course also a good number of their clients, customers, the people out in their professions working throughout 30 countries. And how is it really to be online, and what is it? So in that process, and we used a design thinking process, and we used highly participatory methodologies to have these kind of conversations from the very beginning of surveying, sensing into what is it we need to do, into the whole ideation creation process. And now we are in the piloting and testing phase.
And these were happening online or in the room?
This is all happening online. Is all happening online. So we are using our own medicine, you can say, to kind of, and suddenly it's interesting because, just for us to use some of these methodologies that we're using, maybe what we're doing now, we should do this in that pilot. So yeah, maybe you should, right? So yeah, that's an add-on. That's interesting just to see and witness. Yeah. But that's a good example of the work. That's the work we're doing right now, right? That's part of the work that we're doing right now. But throughout the years, it has been, I was thinking about before we had this call today, where have you actually seen it, Jan? I mean, there's tons of experience of how we have done that in smaller groups into very large groups, but also from the very beginning, it seems to be the front runner in the beginning. If I go back to the 90s, it was really the front runners of people who were already used to engaging others. It could be NGOs, but it also some few corporate companies, right? Until now, these days, I don't know of I can't really think of a company or a specific setting where they wouldn't be using a more participatory approach in their work to engage staff, clients, customers, citizens, experts of different levels, stakeholders of various levels. I mean, we're working with and this is the big we, not the we, Jan here and a few others, but the big we. I mean, I've seen it in large corporates. I've seen it in big public organizations. One of the invitations I just had very recently is to work on a ministerial level on 4 African countries for health programs, where we're starting out with that here in end of April. So it's like, worked from orphanages in Africa, street children in Sao Paulo to boardrooms in Denmark, right? So I think it's more about, if you need to recognize that there is a need to do something maybe a bit different than we normally have done, realizing this why I keep speaking about, and also have a sense of what is it. And if you come up with the what being something about, we need to be more collaboratively, we need to connect more the knowledge we have, the knowledge sharing we need to be able to learn better as an organization, and maybe involve people who are stakeholders to what we are doing here, whatever you're private or public, then I think the how answer to the how could be something more participatory, something that smells like the art of hosting and harvesting conversations that matter.
And if you have to nail down, like what is the value add of using these methodologies, like.
What I have seen is that I have seen solutions coming out of these kind of processes where the problem does not occur again in 2-3 years. What I mean by that is that I have sometimes been asked to support an organization in a project where when I ask them to set the context, they will tell me that, yeah, this challenge we are having, it seems to come back to us, like, and every sometime, we have this problem again. And when I ask them about why do you think it is like that, or what have you done before, I often find a solution from earlier days where a smaller group of people have tried to, with their best capabilities, to come up with solutions on behalf of the many. And often they see, and then when we implement it, they get it and we do something, but 2 years later or some month later, whatever, we are back at square one. And that's one of the, at least that's the impact, the information I get back from follow-up is, it seems like we have cracked it now. We have found a different way to do and deal with this. So it seems like because of our involvement of more multiple layers in the organizations, or simply or empowered others to take care of it by this process, we seem to have overcome this challenge very differently. That's at least one of the very typical outcome or values I see of using it in a more participatory way. Another, which is an add-on to this, is because what I'm speaking of here is putting your focus on what is a challenge, what is a solution, and that's fair enough. A lot of our life is like that. There's a challenge, then we need to come up with a different solution. But I'm also the added on to doing it in a more participatory way is often also that I see it does something to your culture. If suddenly your culture shifts from the few coming up with a solution for the many into, well, let's involve the many in coming up with a solution that we all can work with and we can see is constructive to us. It also does something to your culture. And suddenly the add-on is a more collaborative culture, a more sharing kind of culture. And it becomes also a more, how should I put this, a more collectively leadership kind of culture, in lack of other words, that's what I would call it, where we feel a shared ownership of what we are trying to accomplish here, and thereby also a shared sense of responsibility and accountability of what we want to do. So it does something to your culture as well. And that's funny enough also where I see some of the new challenges, because that change of culture in some of the organizations we work with, where a lot of people are using a participatory approach and are using the methods of hosting and harvesting, we see that they are facing some kind of challenges, because suddenly that culture is pushing a bit to the structure that they have, which maybe is a bit more hierarchical. And it also pushes a bit the processes amongst the different layers in the organization. Because when people have had the sense of that what matters to all of us, we can actually influence and do something about it, suddenly you might also question a bit, why are we having this kind of hierarchy when in our organization? So I'm just saying it does something to the organization when you want to go more participatory, that's for sure.
So we are kind of running out of time, and we are also, but you did, there is one more question that I want to ask you, and you mentioned this new, like the new situation, new reality. Organizations are evolving in the way that they are looking into the world, because of many different things, and one of them is also the technology. And you talked about practicing AOPL online. And we are also just about to launch and to invite a new program online. So what would you say, you know, if AOPL it's not just the craft, the process and everything, it's really facilitating connection. And there is this huge question in the air, you know, can people really connect meaningfully online? Can we really have a connection and a meaningful conversation in this space? So is it possible? And can AOP, does it really work online? What would you say?
Yeah. Well, so running out of time, the answer is yes. Yes, it can. So, but to elaborate on that here, Adriana, I will say, yeah, it can. I'm saying it because I have even been a bit surprised, because about a year ago, I walked in that door you see behind me, and I've kind of been here since, right? Like many of us have. And one of the early projects that came in to me was something we were already working on. We were working on a department in an organization, about 140 people, who all wanted to come together. And, you know, we have it lined up in a room, and I had a full day process where they were coming up with a new it was strategy for this organization and how they wanted to be seen from the outside and blah, 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 blah. Okay. And that was, of course, kind of canceled. And then the client, which was the director and his assistants, came back to me and said, could we do it online? And I was like, we can try. and we did a lot of preparational work. And we delivered it in mid-September last year in 2020. And we were about 120, and we were using like Zoom and all the breakout rooms. And we needed to ensure that they were kind of harvesting, recording whatever their outcome was. And we only had a half day, 4 hours. And I need to be honest with you, I was a bit skeptical. And the reason why I was skeptical was not all the methodologies. It was not the setup in itself. It was not our preparation around what you could call online logistics. I knew that would work. My skepticism was about, will they have conversations, meaningful conversations that matter to them in an online setting? And let's be honest, it was a department in an organization that was used to working with digital tools, yes, but not heavy online as this. All of them being online, they never done it before. The best feedback I got, first of all, I want to say, we were about 120 people, there was one person that for some reason, he couldn't get connected. We found out during the period of the 4 hours, it was because his Wi-Fi was down, up and down all the time. It was too wobbly. We only lost one person in 4 hours. That was success in itself. But the biggest success was that a woman in the end of it says, it has been the best team, she called it a team event. It has been the best team event ever. And I was thinking, either we have done some very, very successful things, or they have done really, really bad team events before. I don't know. Right? I don't know. But she said that. And do you know, and they had these conversations that mattered. We could see in the outcome because it was online. We were using one of, like a Google Word document, but in their own system. So we could see what they were scribbling and what they came up with. And the outcome was outstanding. It was great. But it was more the input that we heard in the end, like something like this, that, we had conversation. Yeah, that was good. It was good to see so many people. That's what we heard. Like, of course they saw people in the different groups they were in, right? But they couldn't see 120 on one screen, and we could only if we were scrolling here, right? So we had that kind of input, and that kind of did it to me, saying after mid-September last year, I say, now I'm a true believer as well, because I had some skepticism. I knew it with groups of 12, 20, not a problem, right? We can do that. But larger groups, plus 50, 60, is that feasible? Even? Yeah, it is. It is actually. I was afraid that all the online technology will take over. It's like, how do you do this? How do you do that? But in the end of the day, it actually doesn't mean as much as we think. If people really wants to connect, and they want to connect about what matters. And we have supported them in identifying what matters, translated that into questions that they really want to engage with. Then whether they are online or on site does not necessarily mean a lot. And we also get these feedback, oh my God, already 4 hours? I thought it was like, we just started. And that's the same reaction we get, that of course, when we're in the room with people. So yeah, I believe we can. Well, I've seen we can.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I think it's about time to round up. I could ask you like zillion different questions. You touched so much of curiosity. But nevertheless, Petra, did we forget anything, like very important to that part of the thing that you wanted to ask? No,
I think you covered beautifully everything. So it was really nice to just hear you and hold this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan.
Anything really fruitful answers.
Yeah. Thanks, Petra. Jan, last word. Anything you want to say?
No, I think, what I really enjoy by our trainings, which we have done throughout last, 15 years or something, is whenever we do trainings, we are so fortunate that we meet people who are as curious as we are, right? And for me, doing trainings, not only with you all in this team, but also with the people who join us at trainings, it inspires my curiosity. So I will stop where I started, saying, after 25 years, I like to think and reflect upon what is art of hosting and harvesting, really, and what is really participatory leadership, and what does it mean to me and how I can use it, because it might mean as much to me as it means to others. And I get that kind of feedback every time we do trainings where people come with this curiosity. So I'm looking forward to the next one in May. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks for all the sharing.